August 11th, 1973, and a party is being held at an apartment building located at 1520 Sedgewick Avenue in the Bronx. The party, held in a rec room able to hold about 100 people, was being hosted by Cindy Campbell, a local resident who was looking to raise a little extra money for new clothes for the upcoming school year, and to DJ the event, she had hired her brother, Clive. This otherwise innocuous party would be counted in later years as ground zero of a brand new genre of music, more than a genre of music, an entire culture that would come to be known as hip-hop. The Campbells were a Jamaican family who at one point had lived in Trenchtown, same neighborhood as Bob Marley. Their father was a record collector with a wide range of taste in music. They would certainly have been aware of the sound systems which were proliferating around the island, growing ever more popular, more powerful, holding open-air dances powered by their speaker and amplifier setups that could be heard and felt from blocks away. They would even rattle zinc fencing in the neighborhoods. They may even have been aware of the DJs who were beginning to come to prominence at these dances, men like Count Machuki, King Stitch, and U-Roy, who would get on the microphone, add their styles of rhythmic patter called toasting or DJing over the records being played. In the late 1960s, the family would relocate to New York in search of a better life, more opportunities. However, they arrived as the borough was in a state of flux and economic downturn, redevelopment having caused most of the area's historic population of Jewish, Irish, and Italian families to move out, jobs leaving, replaced by newer Black and Latino families, a proliferation of housing projects, and an influx of drugs, pushers, and gangs, making the area a tension-fraught war zone. The family took some time to adjust to life in America. Cindy's brother Clive adjusting well, becoming known for his athletic prowess, where in high school he acquired the nickname Hercules, or Herc for short. He soon got involved in graffiti writing, which was then proliferating around the neighborhoods. One of his tags was Cool, inspired by a cigarette ad. When he began DJing, he took the name Kool Herc. His initial set of equipment was borrowed from his father, who had gotten involved with an R&B band and acquired a PA system to entertain the crowd in between the band's sets. This consisted of two direct drive Techniques turntables, which were then fairly recent. The direct drive turntable was more precise, more seamless flow of music than previous belt drive models, and also included an amplifier and a DJ mixer. Clive began experimenting with the system, was soon able to increase its output, and set about DJing himself under the name Kool Herc. He had noticed at dances that dancers, the patrons of the dances, would gravitate toward certain sections of the records being played. The brief instrumental interludes where the bass and drums and percussion would come to the forefront, those sections, sometimes only a few seconds long, that would come to be known as break beats or the breaks. At this dance on August 11th, he decided to try something new, and using 2 records would cue between the instrumental sections, the breaks, to try and extend that rhythmic interlude. The crowd response was immediate. Reportedly, one of those breaks he used was from the James Brown album Sex Machine, the track Give It Up or Turn It Loose. Clive, aka Kool Herc, cueing between 2 records to extend that rhythmic break, unfetter himself from the confines of just playing a previously recorded music, instead zeroing in on what he wanted from that record, extracting it like DNA to find the gold within, and then create a new sense of time and space. This would be the genesis of what came to be known as turntablism, and also ground zero for hip-hop culture. As Clive, Kool Herc began seeking out more of these records with these kind of hidden breaks in between, these records would become legendary as he played them in the dances, his father advising him to remove the labels from them, as they did in sound system dances in Jamaica. So the songs played would be the exclusive preserve of the DJ. Nobody else observing could figure out what they were and trump the DJ at his own game. Some of these breaks would become legendary and would include such tracks as the Jimmy Castor Bunch's It's Just Begun, Babe Ruth with The Mexican, and perhaps Kool Herc's signature song, Apache, by the incredible Bongo Band, adapting a Cliff Richard and the Shadows instrumental. To those instrumental rhythmic breaks, which he could then cue between, extend as long as he wanted, even experimenting with splicing between different break beats, transitioning from one to the other, perfecting his cueing techniques. He would add rapping, rhythmic talk, similar to the Jamaican style of DJing. Rapping, as it came to be known, has a convoluted history drawn from many sources. Some say from the West African griots or storytellers, through to rhythmic sing-song, nursery rhyme, schoolyard chants. Shirley Ellis's The Name Game song from 1964, through to the poetic experimentation with music of Gil Scott-Heron, and especially The Last Poets. Kool Herc would also begin adding raps as the breakbeats were playing. Wasn't especially his forte, so he would get his friend Coke La Rock, sometimes known as the first true rapper, to talk while Herc was manning the DJ tables. Herc's popularity exploded from 1973 to 1975. He would become the #1 draw in the Bronx, able to play wherever he went, and his success would soon see imitators who had observed his techniques would carry them further through their own innovations. However, by the late 1970s, Herc's popularity had begun to wane as competitors began to outstrip him. Finally, he intervened in a fight and a dance, was reportedly stabbed, and following this would withdraw from public life for some time. However, this was ground zero of what would come to be known as hip-hop. Kool Herc's discovery of the breaks or break beats, the hidden instrumental passages in records that could be extracted, looped, and stretched out into an infinity of instrumental rhythm by a skilled and imaginative DJ, inspired dancers who gravitated towards those break beats. And they practiced a very physical, very aggressive style of dancing, inspired in part by James Brown's moves, by martial arts movies, and they became known as breakers from dancing to the breaks or the break beats. and themselves would be referred to as break boys or break girls, soon shortened to b-boys or b-girls. Eventually, some years later, when the media picked up on this style of dancing, it became known as break dancing. And soon every neighborhood would have its crew of break dancers forming, which gave them a group identity, replacing to some extent the gang hierarchy, while also giving them a platform to show their individual styles. Even while graffiti was growing ever more stylish and elaborate, with certain graffiti artists becoming somewhat local celebrities in their own right. Herc's parties would provide an oasis from what was going on the streets outside on the Bronx, where gang violence continued to flourish. Drugs were ever present. There were burned out buildings everywhere. Landlords would set arsons to collect insurance money. The Bronx was a war zone, but things were changing, and Herc's dances coincided with rebellious, youthful energy that some competitors saw they could use to their own advantage, who were observing Herc's innovations, becoming DJs themselves, and thought they could take what he was doing a step further. One such was a young man, also of part Jamaican heritage, who would go by the name Afrika Bambaataa. He was a fearless and charismatic leader of the powerful Black Spades gang, known for his fearlessness in a fight, also his intelligence and his ability to cross turf lines to conduct negotiations with other gangs. He was intelligent, articulate, and could see that the time of the gangs was going to come to an end at some point, but the gangs had had their positive aspects as well. Some fought against the drug pushers and the drugs that were flooding the streets. Some had political agendas. Some set up community health programs. He wanted to take some of the good aspects and replace it with something for the upliftment of Black people in the neighborhood. To this end, in the mid-70s, he would form the Bronx River Organization. By the mid-70s, after an eye-opening trip to Africa, he would return and rename it the Zulu Nation. He had also observed Herc's dances, had begun DJing himself using his eclectic selection of records, which ranged from James Brown to Fela Kuti to Caribbean soca, began mixing different styles of music together and assembled his own crew of dancers and fellow DJs. He would also codify what became to be known as the 4 elements or the 4 pillars of what would come to be known as hip-hop culture. DJing, MCing, or rappers. The rappers would be known as masters of ceremony or mic controllers alternatively. Rapping was what they did. Also b-boying or breakdancing and graffiti. Afrika Bambaataa would build his Zulu organization, eventually calling it the Universal Zulu Nation, as it continued to expand as the era of the gangs began to wane. Another who observed what Herc and Afrika Bambaataa were doing at their dances, playing music, but also playing the turntables themselves like a musical instrument, reshaping, redirecting the music being played into something new, was a young man named Joseph Sadler, who had long had a fascination with electronics, would take household appliances apart, put them back together to see how they worked. He had acquired a set of DJ equipment, was learning how to use it. To this setup, he had added a monitor to his DJ mixer, which allowed him to hear one record through his headphones while another was playing for the crowd. This put him on a more professional standing with upscale club DJs like Pete DJ Jones. He became known for his mathematical precision at isolating where the breaks were on a record, his skill and speed at queuing them up, doing transitions and loops, and acquired the nickname Flash, later Grandmaster Flash. He would popularize a number of innovations that would later become standard in hip-hop DJing, including beatboxing and scratching, rhythmically moving a needle back and forth on a record, which had accidentally been discovered by another DJ, Grand Wizard Theodore. However, perhaps what Flash would become most known for was in furthering the prominence of the MCs, the rappers, masters of ceremony, or mic controllers as they were known. Rapping was what they did. Different from Jamaican music, where the DJ would be the guy talking on the microphone to the crowd, engaging with them more directly, and the man controlling the records would be known as the selector. In hip-hop, the DJ would strictly man the turntables, and it would be the MCs or the rappers that would talk and perform over the microphone. Flash assembled a crew of MCs to rap over his beats while he was manning the turntables. These would include a former Black Spades gang member named Cowboy, another called Melly Mel, and another called Kid Creole. He would call themselves Grandmaster Flash and the Three MCs, which later expanded to the Furious Four and finally the Furious Five. Other early MC crews at this time, as the rappers were beginning to become more prominent, more and more people taking up the microphone would include the Funky Four, who later became the Funky Four Plus One when they added one of the first female rappers to appear on record, Shaw Rock, the Treacherous Three, the Cold Crush Brothers, who included Grandmaster Kaz in their lineup at one point. The rappers were set to become more prominent as hip-hop began to spread like wildfire around the boroughs of New York.
To the hip hop, the hip it, the hip it to the hip hop. You don't stop the rocker to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat, and me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, and the purple and yellow. But first, I gotta.
By the late 1970s, MC crews such as Grandmaster Flash's Furious Five, the Cold Crush Brothers, and others had begun introducing more sophisticated lyrics into their routines, more complicated rhyme patterns than the initial simplistic party-ready raps such as Hey Ho and Put Your Hands in the Air and Wave 'em Like You Just Don't Care. Hip-hop had also begun to slowly permeate into the other boroughs of New York. It could be heard in cabs that would crisscross the city or on hastily recorded cassette tapes of live dances that would circulate, change hands, spread the name of the performers, but it was still very much underground, still very much exclusively a live phenomena that nobody ever thought would result in records of its own. It had also begun to wane in popularity in its birthplace of the Bronx, where the original audience that had rocked to Kool Herc, to Afrika Bambaataa, to Grandmaster Flash at the high school gymnasiums, the community parks, the open-air block parties where they would jack into light poles to power their setups, beginning to age out, instead gravitating toward clubs, old enough to get in many cases, and there high-profile DJs such as Eddie Chiba and Lovebug Starsky had begun to incorporate hip-hop into their shows, drawing some of the audience away from the originators. Record labels were also starting to wonder if there was some kind of commercial potential in this music or if it was just a passing fad. One such was a former R&B singer turned record label owner based in New Jersey named Sylvia Robinson. Her and her son had met Henry Jackson, known as Big Bank Hank, who managed an MC crew while working part-time as a bouncer and also at a pizza joint. They had heard him rapping over a cassette tape of his friend Grandmaster Kaz and asked him if he wanted to make a record. Henry Big Bank Hank would go back to his friend Grandmaster Kaz, who would lend him his book of rhymes, his lyrics. Henry would be put together with a couple of friends, Michael Wright, known as Wonder Mike, and Guy O'Brien, known as Master G, and repair to the Robinsons' studio in New Jersey, where they had set up a record label called Sugarhill Records, dedicated to hip-hop, and would put this group together as the Sugarhill Gang. None of them had ever set foot on stage before, were not actually known as rappers themselves. When the record came out, it was something of an affront to the crews that had been out there that had originated these styles, that this group that nobody had ever heard of before would have the first major hip-hop hit record. It had cropped up on record before. Brooklyn funk group named the Fatback Band had put out a song called King Tim 3, Personality Jock, but the one that would be ground zero for hip-hop would be the first signing and the first release by Sugarhill Records called Rapper's Delight. The song was based on the huge disco hit by Chic, Good Times, not sampled, not rapping over the record itself, but recreated live in the studio by the Robinsons' in-house band, and the opening lyrics of which many listeners, when they first heard it, thought they were hearing Chic's Good Times until the rapping came in, and those initial lyrics would cement forever the name of this new genre as they come in with hip to the hippity hip hop, you don't stop, and going on to say, this is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. The song would hit black radio stations where DJs would play the entire 15-minute length of it. And a rapper named Chuck Riddenhauer, aka Chuck D, over on Long Island, remembers being amazed that hip-hop, which he knew as a sprawling live form that could stretch out for hours, could be contained on a record itself. The song would prove to be a phenomena, would hit the American top 40 charts, would reportedly hit #1 in Canada, would sell thousands of copies a week, but run into legal threats from Chic itself before subsequent issues of the record would belatedly credit them as composers, would also result in the first hip-hop LP, the self-titled Sugarhill Gang, not entirely rapping. Rap still very much unproven if it was going to have staying power or just a passing fad. So several of the songs on here are sung in a soul R&B style, but the Sugarhill Gang and Rapper's Delight was the big bang of hip-hop that would take it far beyond its birthplace of the Bronx, beyond even New York, and set it on the path to spreading all over the world. Hope you've enjoyed my look at the origins of hip-hop. Cheers, guys.